Hey guys, before I start the video, I just want to give a big shout out to Shay and Death Metal for giving me donations on Patreon. Thank you so much. So I was about 19 to 20 years old. I grabbed a couple plants out of a cornfield during the fall. I came home and put some leaves in a strainer and boiled it for about 10 minutes. Then I let it sit on a low temperature for about another 7 to 8 minutes. It was done. I'm still young and highly uneducated about this plant. I've just heard that it was a crazy experience, an experience that I clearly was not ready for. And yes, witches used a concentrated version of this plant, made it into an ointment, and would cover a broomstick with it and insert it into their vagina. That's where the modern witch riding a broomstick comes from. Anyway, the last pot was a dark amber. The first two were lightly colored, almost looked like urine. And so I drank about 2 small cups of the first 2 brews, and I decided to drink the amber one. That's when stuff starts getting weird. The sky turns purple. I can't read the clocks anymore. The numbers were changing and looked like they had mold on them. So I called my friend because I needed a ride to pick up some Xanax and a bottle of codeine syrup in case anything went wrong. I took a few Xanax and drank the syrup to calm down. He told me I was talking to people in the back seat that weren't there. I said, "Ha ha, gnarly dude," as I suddenly snapped back into reality for a split second. Then I'm out there again, smoking imaginary cigarettes. I come home and go downstairs to lay down. This is when I realize I may have taken too much. I dropped a cigarette I thought I was smoking and realized I never was. Okay, this is getting kinda boring, so I'm gonna keep it short and sweet. I believe I may have gone to sleep for a little while. I wake up and I'm inside a bar talking to people. We're having a great time until it all goes black and I'm back inside my basement. My sense of reality is gone. I slightly remember talking to someone who said that they were dead. Freaked me out a little bit. So I go upstairs and start talking about going to dinner with the president and said I need to get dressed. My parents said, "What?" Thinking I was just joking, but they told me when they looked in my eyes, they had never seen a look so lost, so gone, and so insane. I tried to put shoes in the microwave to turn them into Pop-Tarts. Oh God. After my mom stopped me from that, she told me she loves me and didn't know what I was on, so I had to leave the house and go sleep it off in my car. I said, okay. So I'm chilling in my car when all of a sudden, a fucking hearse pulls up. Out of the hearse comes a witch. Following her are a gang of short black demon-looking creatures. The witch was about 7 feet tall, black, and misty, like the blackest black with the pure black mist waving off of her. I see all this through my rear view mirror, and when I step outside, I still see them coming. Then they disappear into my parents' car. I walk up and talk to them. I said I'm in trouble. I just got kicked out, and I can't have any friends over. The witch looks at me and says in a demonic, manly voice,
"Our time has not come yet."
This is when I lose my shit. I break open the shed door and grab some gasoline and a baseball bat. I yell to my family to get the gun because they're trying to steal the car. I start throwing gas all over the car with a lighter in hand. They are in, and it seemed like they were giggling. My dad comes outside and starts screaming, "Where the fuck are they? The cops are on the way." I said, "In the car, look." They were gone. The police show up and say, "Drop the bat," to which I complied. I snapped back into reality, realized I had taken that stuff about 2 to 3 days ago. The cops asked me what happened, and all I could think to say was that a gang of pickpockets were trying to steal my car. They asked me if I was sober, and I said yes, used a flashlight to look into my eyes, and said, well, no one's here. I apologized, and they left. My parents told me I could sleep in the garage. I said, okay. Luckily, I still have some emergency Xanax, so I took them. I knocked on the door later and asked if I could come in because mice were all over the floor. They said, I love you, but not tonight. We will talk in the morning. Eventually, I went to sleep. My sweet mother found all the pictures of Jimson tea and flushed them, hugged me, and said, "Never again. Do you know what you tried to do?" I looked down and said, "Yes." I followed up with "The devil ain't no man or female." I think I might have seen the devil or some high-up demon. Had sleep paralysis a few days later. Do not try this shit if you are not a pure psychonaut or a shaman. Things could have gotten really bad. I could have lost my life or burned down a car. This is nothing to mess with. It's not like a psychedelic, it's a deliriant. Anyone else brave or stupid enough to try this plant? My advice? Don't. First of all, I would like to let you all know that this is not a party drug. This is a very powerful, very poisonous plant. It is nothing at all like acid, and yes, it can kill you in a variety of ways. I had almost total amnesia after this experience. This report is compiled of things I have remembered over the past 3 years. Kessler and I have both been diagnosed as schizophrenic in the past year. Is it coincidence, or did the Datura have something to do with it? One night in early October of 2001, I was house sitting at my friend Cassie's house in downtown Savannah. My friend Kessler was there house sitting too. We were just sitting around, smoking and drinking a little bit. Cassie and her roommates were at a rave in South Carolina. Eventually, we fell asleep. The crew arrived home early the next morning. We were sitting around passing the bong around, talking and stuff. Cassie gave Kessler and I a small bag full of black seeds in a crimson liquid. I had no idea what they were, and neither did Kessler. Cassie explained to us that it was Jimson weed. I still had no idea. Neither of us had ever heard of it. I was a stupid kid, so I didn't even research it. Cassie told me that it was enough to make about 5 people trip nuts. Now, Kessler and I were psychonauts, so we thought her definition of tripping nuts was probably a bit different than ours. So we just divided the seeds in half and ate them. I'd say we each had about 70 fat, juicy seeds, and we each drank the liquid, whatever that was. I had done acid, ecstasy, DMT, and a lot of other stuff before this point, but nothing could prepare me for the world that I was about to enter. I guess this would be a good place to explain something. The hallucinations from Datura are very strong. They are very bizarre, but seem natural. What I mean is, everything is very, very odd, but seems real. More real than reality, if that makes any sense to you. Kessler and I waited for about an hour or two, and still weren't feeling it. We went to my house and chilled out there for a while. We were starting to get very tired. We decided to go back to Cassie's house so we could stay up. We got there and we were feeling very drunk by this time. Drunker than I've ever been. And I've been pretty drunk. I fell asleep on Cassie's couch. When I awoke, I was feeling even more drunk. I couldn't even stand up. My girlfriend at the time, Beth, drove me home. I don't remember, but she said that on the way home, I kept on taking my lighter out of the dash and trying to hit it like it was a pipe. But when I arrived home, that's when it hit me really hard. I went into my bedroom and got online to check my email. Suddenly, I saw a miniature version of myself walk out of my monitor. He sat down at my computer desk and started talking to me. We had a very deep conversation about life, love, and many other things. Then, he told me that I needed to go get some water. I went to the bathroom and filled a cup up with water and a bottle cap for my little friend. When I looked in the mirror, it wasn't me that I saw. It was a bloody mess. My face was mutilated beyond recognition. I started washing my face, but the more I washed, the bloodier it seemed to get. After about an hour, the blood just disappeared and I was able to recognize myself again. I went back to the room and my little friend was gone. I heard a knock at the front door as soon as I got back to my room. I went to go see who it was, and when I opened the door, I was in for a surprise. I think that everyone I had ever known was there, even people I had forgotten all about. This makes me think that Datura has the power to unlock forgotten memories. I let the hundreds of people in, and we all went to my room, which is strange because I had a very small room, but everyone was there. I was talking to and catching up with everyone. People kept on disappearing and reappearing in random places in my room. People also kept dying, decaying, and eventually disappearing. I was so worried, but soon forgot all about it. There was also this guy with a Chick-fil-A cup as a head. He would keep dying, decaying, and coming back to life. I tried to kick everyone out, but I couldn't seem to get the Chick-fil-A guy to leave. Every time I tried to pick up the bones, they would turn to sand. He would then be reborn from the sand. I was getting really pissed off and quite freaked out. My friend Superman appeared from somewhere and helped me out. He tried to pick up the bones and they turned to sand, so he pulled a broom out from somewhere and swept the guy out of the front door. Superman came back to my room dragging a large cross. He talked to me as he proceeded to crucify himself. When he was completely hung up on the cross, he started to become very disfigured. He then exploded into ashes. I was horrified. What had happened to my friend? I gathered the ashes up in a dustpan and took them into the kitchen sink. I dumped the ashes into the sink and ran water on them. A new Superman grew up right out of my sink. He thanked me for bringing him to life, and then hazily left. I decided to go for a walk, and I saw my car in the parking lot, and it was wrecked very badly. I was upset. I went over and tried to open the door, but the whole car melted at my touch. Then I leaned up against a tree, and the tree melted. I figured out that I had the power to melt things just by touching them. Then, I had the idea to touch myself. I did, and nothing happened. I got very lost, and it took me hours to realize that I was just in the parking lot in front of my apartment. I wanted to go back inside, but I couldn't. I had locked the door and already had melted my keys on accident. The power eventually went away, so I used my ID to try to break into my house. I couldn't do it. I walked away and found my keys back in their solid state. I used my keys and let myself in. I soon noticed that my ID was missing. I'll explain close to the end. I went to take a shower, and when I got my clothes off, I noticed I had no sexual organs at all. I was freaked out, but I figured there was nothing I could do about this. I got in the shower and started to wash. When I got out of the shower and went back into my room, there was a 7-foot tall totem pole staring at me. The totem pole was my CD tower. We had a conversation, then the strangest thing happened. Time started to slow down, slower and slower, until it eventually stopped. Everything around me was suspended in time. My cat was frozen. My totem pole, who was just talking to me just a minute ago, was now frozen in time, with his mouth open in mid-sentence. This was very strange. Eventually, time came back. Remember, it all seemed very natural at the time. Beth had come over to check on me. We were sitting there talking for hours, and as we talked, I slowly began to come down. The telephone rang, and I went to go pick it up. It was Beth. How was this possible? I looked over at the Beth on my bed, and she began to fade into nothing, waving at me as she went. This was the last major hallucination that I had on Datura. About my ID that had come up missing. I was so messed up on the Datura that I was trying to break into the wrong house. The next day, I got a knock at the door. It was the lady who lived in apartment 703. She told me that she had found my ID in her door. I wasn't even going to try to explain. The after effects of this stuff are wicked. I couldn't see anything clearly for about a week. I also felt strange for almost a month. It was like a month-long acid trip. I was having minor hallucinations for weeks. So last summer I decided to harvest some seeds from a Datura plant growing in my backyard. I knew that Datura was a deliriant and that it could be potentially deadly. It was a risk I was willing to take, out of curiosity. By the way, I was alone for some of it. So on January 19th on Saturday, I ate 5 seeds at around 10:30 p.m. Just chewed them up and swallowed them down with some water. They didn't taste bad actually, very nutty though. So all I can really remember in order was my first night on it. The next day just seemed like a big mess of craziness and hell. At 10:40, I started feeling nauseous, real shitty, and body is restless. It feels like I really need to stretch. At 11:10, I started feeling really dazed, like I'm stuck in a daydream of a memory, and I can't really get out. I forgot what I'm even doing in the real world. At 11:30, my house became really, really huge. I had to get up to go to the bathroom, and I instantly became distracted by something in my living room. I almost pissed myself. This is when I lost track of time, or I just stopped looking at the clock. The rest of the events are just memories of this particular night. I can't remember what order they happened, so bear with me. I logged on to the Shroomery chat room and told people what I was on. This was the only time I felt really grounded. No major hallucinations. I was still able to carry out a cohesive conversation with some of the other people. I felt pretty much normal. I started to hear people chatting behind me, so I turned around. It was my friends. They all came to hang out with me at my house. So I went and sat with them, and we talked and joked around for a little while. Then I went to the kitchen to grab some drinks for them, and when I returned, they were gone. At first, I was disappointed that they ditched me. I remember even telling myself, those fuckers ditched me. Fuck them. Then I remembered that I was on Datura, and they must have been a hallucination. I got really scared for a moment, and then I completely forgot they were ever there, and that I was on Datura. I remember being in the kitchen and random objects were appearing in my hand. First, a cigarette was in my hand, and I went to go take a puff. When I put my hand up to my mouth, it was gone. I didn't think anything of it. Then, there was a Coke can. I went to go take a drink, and it was gone. I didn't mind at all. I remember walking around my pool table hundreds of times, just thinking about the past. My memories had become so vivid that I was pretty much blinded by them. This felt really good. After a while of coming back and forth into the Shroomery chat room, I thought the Datura was starting to wear off, so I decided to go to bed. I actually fell asleep really fast. The next day, I woke up really early. I looked down and I was covered in hundreds of maggots. Please note at this time, I had no idea that the Datura was still on. I felt 100% normal, even though I saw hundreds of maggots on me. I did not mind the maggots at all. I just told myself, well, they'll go away eventually. So I jumped in the shower and tried to scrub them off. I remember seeing them fall on the shower floor and go down the drain. When I got out, they were back on my skin. I went downstairs and tried to eat some breakfast, but my food was also covered in maggots. I told my dad and he was like, well, just throw it away and try again later. In real life, he did not say this. At some point in the day, my dad was gone, and something told me to go look for him. So I jumped into my truck and started driving around town. Within minutes of leaving my own neighborhood, I was completely lost and could not recognize anything. I started to panic and started turning down random roads. All of a sudden, my cousin was in the passenger seat. He was trying to help me find my way back home, but when it was time to give directions, he disappeared. So I was like, fuck, how am I gonna find my way back home now? Then, my friend Jerome was in the truck, along with my friend Chris, who was in the back seat. I tried asking them how do I get home, but they kept telling me that they don't know where my house is at. I kept lighting up cigarette after cigarette after cigarette. I had an endless amount of cigarettes, and I needed them because I was stressing the fuck out. After a while, my friends were gone, and I was alone. It was dark now, and I still had no idea where I was. I turned down a road that looked like my old trailer park, except it was deserted. There were no trailers in the park. The road was populated by hundreds of weeds, and I was coming to a dead end. I felt a hand grab my neck, and I stopped the truck. I looked around for a while, and decided to turn around. Once I turned out of the park, I was able to recognize where I was. I found my way home, and went directly up to my room. Now apparently, in reality, when I got home, my parents were freaking out, and they started yelling at me. They knew I was tripping on something, and they told me to go into my room and not come out until I was sober. I have no recollection of this at all. In my mind, I went home, and nobody was there. At some point during the night, I was sitting at my computer desk. Big bugs were crawling on me, and I still didn't know I was hallucinating until I saw something on my computer desk. One of the wooden panels on my computer desk turned into a TV screen. It had full color, audio, and I could actually feel it. There was something about this TV screen and what was playing on it that told me that I was actually hallucinating. So now, I know that I'm hallucinating, and I know that it's the Datura. I started to freak out badly, and I crawled into bed and forced myself to go to sleep. The next day, I woke up at around 2 p.m. My body ached, my head ached, my mouth was dry, and my eyes were in pain. I sat up and looked around and sort of asked myself, is it over? I looked at my arms, no maggots. I looked around my room, no phantom people. After I was sure that I was no longer hallucinating, I went back to sleep and then woke up later around 4 p.m. There was a lot more stuff that I'm sure happened. I just can't remember all of it. Datura is definitely a fucking insane drug. I highly recommend that everyone stays away from it. It is definitely not something you would do to feel good. It is just a neurological poison with no other purpose but to fuck you up. But I'm really glad I experienced it and lived through it. Definitely something I can brag about. I did something most people will never, ever experience or are too afraid to experience.